Ken, do you believe that affordability right now is an issue for the average home buyer?
Huge problem. Yeah, both obviously on the mortgage side and on the if you own a home, all the costs to own that home, property tax, insurance, utilities, those kinds of things. So yes, affordability is a big deal, really on the rental community as well.
And then Melody, how do you feel about affordability currently and how that's playing into everything?
Yeah, I think that is the deal. And that's why we've had such a frozen housing market, with the worst sales since 1995 on the existing home side. And we've increased population by 20%. There's something wrong, obviously, in the housing market. And I think it's that, really your first time home buyers have been priced out by investors and they can't afford, to move to form households. So yes, huge problem.
So Melody, do you think that this market is fundamentally different than 2008, or do you think that this is a similar market to 2008?
I think there are differences and similarities. I think that what a lot of people, we heard a lot of what I call credit quality gospel singing coming out of the last crisis. And I was a part of that because my job was to go out, make sure that Dodd-Frank got implemented, that we were, underwriting quality loans. But the problem in 2021, they kind of removed the debt to income threshold. And the automated underwriting systems in the back end that are approving those mortgages, I think that people figured out how to game them, while at the same time you had credit scores that were inflated because, you had all the moratoriums on evictions, moratoriums on, the forbearances in the mortgage space. And then and so I'm primarily talking about what I call agency or those prime loans. But on the FHA, there's no question that those are very poor credit quality. And even those credit scores were inflated. And they're a much larger percentage now. That's what a lot of people don't know is, back during the last crisis, FHA was around 7%. They've doubled that. And then you also have the private market, which is about 3%. And that's already double-digit delinquent. And so we kind of have it's not the same, but there are definitely similarities. And another similarity is that there's just speculation. And I think that actually the speculation is much worse during this cycle.
So Ken, how would you respond to that?
2008 for me was just pain. Like that's what I remember. I went through it. I didn't completely understand what was happening at the time. I wish I now knew what now I look back, I was like, darn it. It was all, to me, it was very predictable if you take a look at what happened. And I think you have to go back at before 2008. So what happened was we had two presidents that were pushing the American dream. And, one was Clinton and the other was Bush. So two different colors, guys. So, that was, I think that's really, really, really important because they were pushing affordability. They were pushing all these things. And what it did is it pushed homeownership up to its highest we've seen. It was at 69.2% home ownership. Now, the side of the equation that I'm on is the rental side. So what was happening is I had multifamily and I was a landlord and I was all that stuff. And I was losing people. I was losing all my tenants to people that were buying houses during that run. And why? Because you could fog a mirror and get a mortgage. And so I actually we had renters coming into our apartments that could not afford the rent. And then they would go buy a house. I was like, okay, there's a problem here brewing. These are people that can't afford a house. Clearly they can't afford a rental either, because we run their credit. So what we had is this bubble that popped, obviously, under Obama. And so he didn't actually create the problem, but it popped under his presidency. And at that time, we had, so many foreclosures and defaults and all that stuff. And so that's when I really saw what, call it a massive correction or call it a crash or whatever you want to call it. But that's when I saw prices skyfall. They just fell. And the reason is because we had 4 million listings. And the real issue that we had at that time in 2008, I think this is the biggest issue, this is the biggest change from today, is post-crash, people only had like $6 trillion of equity in their home. And the what, for there to be a real crisis, you have to have somebody that can't pay something. And in this time around, we have 34, 35, 36 trillion dollars of equity sitting in people's homes. And so while maybe they do have a disruption of, in their family somehow for perhaps job or divorce or something like that, they're sitting on equity to be able to pay their bills. And that's very different from 2008.